I'd like to welcome today's panelists. Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Chike Ugea, former Commissioner of Information, Delta State, and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's start with the death of Robert Mugabe, the former Zimbabwean president who died at the age of 95 on Friday. Mugabe, who was toppled in a palace coup by top generals in the country's army in 2017, once boasted that he would rule the Southern African country until he was 100 years old. Just a day after his death, the only clear sign that Zimbabwe was in mourning were flags flying at half-mast. The streets and shops were packed, weddings and parties went ahead as planned. Most people were going about their usual business, trying to eke out a living. While Mugabe is hailed for having led Zimbabwe to independence, for many Zimbabweans, he is also the man who wrecked the economy, leaving the people to live with the consequences. By the time of Mugabe's removal from office, he was widely ridiculed for dozing off in public events and had become a mere mascot for the corrupt elites he had placed in power. Mandela was mourned by the world. Mugabe may have a far smaller funeral crowd, and while some might remember him mistily, after all, he was a hero of the non-aligned and liberation movements everywhere. Others will remember him for his lust for power. Well, Robert Mugabe, end of an era, as they say, for Zimbabwe. For many persons in Zimbabwe, particularly those who are called born-frees, they call themselves born-frees. That is, children who were born, after the independence in 1980. They have not known any other leader for the better part of their lives until 2017, when Emerson Mnangagwa emerged as president under circumstances that we're familiar with. But, we're talking about the legacy of Robert Mugabe. Feelings have been mixed about his legacy. Some regard him as the liberation hero who became a tyrant and a despot. And some say, well, he was a controversial figure, conflicted, and that whatever we may say, the positive is shorter, on the spectrum than the negative. Yemi, let me start with you.
I think so, and I think for me, it's the ending bit of your script speaks to sort of legacy. You said Mandela was mourned by the world. Yes, he had spent 27 years in jail, came out, decided he was going to do one term, and then lived on for many years after that. But I think, especially on the continent, how very myopic our leaders are and about their legacy, and thinking that it is what it is that they do as much as they want. I mean, died at 95. If not for the palace coup in the coup in 2017, he really might have died in office. He would have, yes, indeed. And I think that it's, for me, that's the lesson that, as you said, the good parts of him were so much shorter, that the latter part of his administration is what, in a sense, as far as I'm concerned, really what will define him. Because your born-frees that are the ones really who own narratives for today don't really have a narrative of you that they would proudly propagate. So they won't. And you will find out in another generation, your memory will be shaped by those who you so adversely affected, while those who positively affected, if I want to use that word, will not be there to share the stories. And it's really quite unfortunate. Yeah, he got independence, but would that be what people remember him for? I doubt it.
Well, Chike, what do you think? Well, as at the time he left office, he was the oldest world leader,
yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, Mugabe is a tragic hero. One of those characters we used to see in Shakespeare, exactly. Yeah, it was such a pity because, like you said, he went through the whole 9 yards, from freedom fighter to leader, from leader to a despot. From the despot, he became even a meme as far as we were concerned towards the end of his life. And that just shows, like I said, the trajectory of the man. He lived like he was never going to die, and he thought maybe he was never going to die. And that's what happens when you arrogate to yourself all power. That's why they say, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Here was a great man who got independence for his people, fought for liberation. I remember in those days when we were much younger in the 70s. What was that party? Was it MPLA or, you know, the party had then?
His own party was the ZANU.
ZANU PF.
And then later ZANU became ZANU PF.
Okay. And we remembered him for all those great things he did. He did a massive pushback on the white oppression in his country and all that. Then he got the reins of power, and that was it. From then, it became downhill. And I see it as a pity. And like Yemi rightly said, the bomb freeze, as you call them, people today in Zimbabwe, who are those that would really remember him, and what would they remember him for? Because really, if a man dies at 95, it should be a celebration. I don't mind, you know, whether people are going about their daily jobs or not. They should even come out screaming and dancing and celebrating his life. But I wonder whether he will even get that.
Well, Prof, what are your thoughts on Mugabe and Mugabeism, as his admirers define his philosophy?
I look at your submissions differently. It is normal for some people to see in him a good person and to also see in him a bad person. That is normal. But the bitter truth in life is that it is not known in history where anybody has fought the truth and won. The truth is always constant. And so when we relate the truth to his legacy, there can be no disputing the fact that what he had done for his people positively largely outweighs all this issue of despotism and the negative ways people are looking at him. The bitter truth is that he fought, all right, the Western world in order to ensure that his people, you know, are completely liberated. If people can simply remember the bitter truth that in 1922, the colonialists put in place the policy of Chimurenga, then all the things said negatively about him, they will have a rethink. What is the policy of Chimurenga? It's a policy that divided Zimbabwean land into 5 categories. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Category 1 is the most arable, the best land, the land that was given to white Zimbabweans. In fact, the first 3 categories, white Zimbabwe worst. That's what the black Zimbabweans were given. So when negotiations took place in 1980, Lancaster discussions,
House Conference,
the British promised to pay compensation, promised at least 75 million pounds. But until the time Robert Mugabe died, the British have not paid more than 1 million out of the promise. This money was supposed to be given to white farmers, settlers, from whom they are going to take land and share amongst the black people. So we should not just talk about liberation, political liberation, in terms of legacy. It is the content that we need to place greater emphasis on. So in this case,
under the land redistribution policy, you know, Mugabe ended up giving, you know, the land that was taken from the whites to his cronies, to family members. And so what was meant to be a nationalistic move became a legacy of plunder and corruption and abuse.
That be remembered?
Okay, look, we should remember both sides, both, you know, positive and negative aspects. They are there. The critical point there is that he came up with a policy that gave the opportunity for black Zimbabweans to have access to that land.
But when these people now don't,
hold on.
How would they remember that?
Hold on. Today, are you telling me now that there are no black Zimbabweans having land category 1?
I'm not saying
The
they're
mere
not,
fact-
but the populace didn't benefit from that policy is what I'm saying.
No,
So in
no, they
terms of
did.
how
They did. The fact that he gave to his cronies.
That's what the
is a
general
different-
populace. That's what I'm very clear. I used that word deliberately. I didn't say no Zimbabwean benefited. I said the general populace. So the elites don't quite qualify.
No,
in that regard.
You see, there is a policy consciously orchestrated against Robert Mugabe because of his...
That he orchestrated against himself. I mean.
No.
Okay.
Britain
Prof,
in
I
particular.
think the biggest concern is about the polarity of his career.
Yeah.
A man who started well and who ended poorly. And that's why, I think Chike was saying it was a tragic hero. Because in Sophocles,
that one differently.
in Sophocles, Oedipus Rex, what we're told is, let no man call himself happy until he carries that happiness to the grave in peace.
That is one school
Hubris.
of thought.
Yes.
You see,
Yes. No, I'm quoting from Sophocles.
yes, it's a school of thought. It's one way of looking at life. When I was talking about bitter truth, the longer you stay in power, the quicker you get your ideas exhausted. Yemi rightly pointed out one deductive point, that if Robert Mugabe had not been ousted in 2017, the likelihood of his reaching the age of 100 as he wanted, before he dies, would have been there. It's a very good, tenable hypothesis. All right. But the other side of the argument is this. When you stay in power for as long as you want, I am saying that new ideas will never come up.
Yeah, you shouldn't stay.
So I'm coming.
And that is why democracies are tenured.
That is why.
So you can bring out your best within that period
Defined
and
period.
hand over the baton.
I agree with you at that level. You see, African leaders, when we talk about sit-tight leaders,
Yes.
what's happening? You have, you take Congo, for instance, many countries in Africa.
Gabon.
Now,
like that.
what do? They manipulate constitutional provisions, all right, in order to prolong their stay in power.
Yeah.
Now, they have all been doing this. So,
And in the case of Robert Mugabe, if he was not pushed out in 2017, he was going to run again for an 8th term
That's
in
right.
office
At
in
90
2018.
At 90.
And
what?
even though it was, literally sleepwalking,
Yes.
no,
Yes.
but you see, I think we are still missing the point.
which is,
Or I will say I have not explained where I'm going to. You see, African leaders argue that you cannot come to power, you cannot change government by use of force. It should be through democracy. Now, an African leader comes to manipulate the constitution, to change the constitution, which is presented as democratic way of doing it. So when you get to power, when you stay in power, when you ensure re-election, please, what else do you expect?
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, opinion is divided on Mugabe. I don't think we'll reach a consensus. But for me, it's a contradiction. I mean, he invested a lot in education and health.
Yes.
But today he had to die in Singapore.
That's right.
Well, but we'll take a short break. When we return, This Day Live continues. Stay tuned.